Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm hesitating a little bit because I think we just have all sorts of technical hiccups on LinkedIn side. I have this feeling it's not pushing it out. So if you can do me a favor, can you just let me know whether you're where you're coming in from, whether you're watching this on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Yahoo. What was the last one? Twitter or X or whatever that's called. Just let me know where you're coming in from. So Giovanni, you're coming in from LinkedIn though, so that's good. So I'm assuming there's people on it, and we'll get rocking and rolling. Actually, if you bear with me one second, well, not 1 second, but in a minute, I'm going to start switching around some of the views. You guys have been with me for a while, so hopefully this will work. But let me just get started with a quick tip for success for those of you showing up early and on time, which I really appreciate. Okay, so I see people coming in from LinkedIn. Thank you. My tip for success for you today is consider engaging on LinkedIn with the people who are down at Vets 24, big veterans conference down there, because it's not all about veterans. Clearly, that's the main focus, and VA is the main agency down there. But there's a ton of businesses. First off, the Vets Conference covers across every single product and service. So you might have people that you can engage with. You're like, oh, we sell similar stuff, or we're targeting certain agencies. But people are putting information out there on LinkedIn, and you want to go just give it a thumbs up, maybe even comment, hey, I'm not down there. Thanks for letting me know about that. So it's just something for you to consider doing. It's a little tip for success for those showing up early and on time. Okay, let me get going with my formal part of the training. So today we're going to be talking about capture, obviously, and I want to talk about really the beginning part of capture. What happens sometimes with companies is we tend to find opportunities that we like, and we see them in different places, and we put them into the pipeline. And the next step, frankly, is we're straight to writing a response. This is not sales. It's certainly not capture, right? And the idea of just responding means we're leaving out this huge, valuable activity we can do within sales. When we do capture, that's when we're positioning ourselves above our competitors, ahead of our competitors. We're really trying to sit there and demonstrate to the government, either through activity and capture, like going out and having meetings, or from what we learned being inserted into our responses. We're trying to demonstrate to the government that, hey, we get you more than they get you. We both came in and said we can build a box, but our box sits there and says we truly understand what you want to do with it. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean by capture and understanding the needs. I remember this story, and I'll never forget it, from IBM. And I was doing this huge sales training, and we were in there. And the lesson learned came from this guy who was a vice president at IBM. This is way back. It's probably 2 decades ago now. But anyways, he was telling this story about how he was personally responsible for one of the biggest losses the IBM had. Not just a lost sales opportunity, but they were the incumbent and they lost. And the reason was because the government put out a recompete basically for these scanners. So they had these scanners, and you scan parts or something coming across the workbench, and the government employees who had it, there were certain requirements. So one of the requirements was it must be able to withstand a fall from 7 feet. And this is where the IBM lead, this VP I was talking to, he said this is where the big problem came in. He knew that environment. He had been supporting that customer for years, and he knew that the bench they worked on was actually sitting about a 3.5, 4 foot level, and so people could easily work. He goes, it just needs to work on that so it could fall off. So he talked to the product side of the house in IBM, and they built their specs and they built their response around the ability to withstand that impact of like a 4 foot drop. They lost out the contract. They lost it out because they didn't provide the government what they asked for. The problem is not there, right? Any compliant company would have done a product that can handle a 7 foot drop. So IBM made their first mistake by not listening to the government. But the capture part, the one that relates to today, is this guy thought he knew the customer better than anybody else because he had been there. But he didn't go back and ask, hey, I know you guys are only at a 4 foot level. Why are you saying 7 foot? If he had, he would have learned what he learned after the fact when he went back and talked to his friend who was working for the government, right? They couldn't talk during the acquisition, but afterwards he went back to his friend who was working the environment. He says, why is it 7 feet? He goes, because sometimes employees, when they want a coffee break, will hold it up 7 feet high and drop it. It's like, oh man. And so capture is this ability to really understand the customer more than what you will just see in a document. Okay, so let me share my screens. We're going to be rocking and rolling through my slides. I don't actually have a lot of slides because I want to walk us through more chatting, but these are steps. Today's training is around capture activities, the very early ones, steps you can take after you find an opportunity in your pipeline. So I'm going to break down today's training into 3 components. One is just a reminder to us, what is capture as it relates to the sales lifecycle? The second thing I want to cover is the first thing you do on capture. It's kind of, I call it trust but verify, but you're looking at, is this opportunity right for you? And then the last thing I'm going to cover down on are 10 things you should be doing as it relates to capture. And I think these are the 10 first things you should be doing. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just to get you kick-started on your capture activity around a particular opportunity. So that's what we're going to cover down on. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results, and that's what I want for you. That's why we do these trainings. If you haven't done so already, then make sure you're subscribed to our Government Contracting Success newsletter. It's the largest newsletter out there in the GovCon space on LinkedIn, because people like you keep valuing the information we put in. We put a lot of information in. For example, a recent article we had was 250 Army opportunities. We were lining them up and making it easier for you to get in and see them. The other thing is, I just want to thank the people who registered for training. We had a whole bunch of people register for training. When you register for training, it enables LinkedIn to push this out to others in our government contracting community who would value the training and come back. Hey, one last thing is, do me a favor, in the chat, you're putting whether you came in from LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. But can you let me know, I'm really curious, is especially on LinkedIn, if that's where you're coming in, did LinkedIn let you know? So just write LinkedIn if LinkedIn said, hey, Neil's live, or did you already know you were coming to the training and you just proactively came in? So LinkedIn or proactive, or reactive and proactive. I want to know, because lately LinkedIn's been having some hiccups. I just want to figure out anything I might be able to do on that side. Okay, last thing before we start in the other part of the training is just I wanted to share some exciting news for us, right? We're launching GovCon in a Box, and it's going to be a web-based solution to help small businesses making less than 10 million get to 10 million. We're really going to focus on solving the top 3 challenges that small business government contractors face: getting in the door to meet with more federal buyers, finding teammates who want to work with you, whether as a prime or a sub, and then identifying, pursuing, and responding to opportunities you can win. If that's something that you're interested in learning more about, join our wait list so that I can tell you when we launch. So it's at govconinabox.com. govconinabox.com. If you're already on the wait list, do me a favor, throw it into the chat so I can see. Okay, so let's talk about what is capture. So I've been doing federal sales for a long time, 20 plus years. And I like breaking things down into very simple process steps or frameworks so that I can understand. And then I share them with you, right? But really, I'm breaking them down for me. And so I break down federal sales into 3 steps, or 3 phases, if you will: business development, capture, and proposal, or what I call response, right? So that's proposal, RFIs, whatever. And so capture fits right in the middle. Business development is about understanding the agency, building relationships, hearing about opportunities. Capture is about one single opportunity, doing something with it. You might do capture on multiple opportunities, but capture is an activity you do on an opportunity. And then response is just responding. So capture is the one we're going to talk about. We fit in the middle. The whole point of capture is that you can shape an opportunity to your advantage. Anything you do, whether it's having conversations with the government, whether it's doing your research and really understanding the history of an opportunity, not just the history of the requirement, but how was it competed before, maybe who had gone after it, et cetera. Some of these things, when you do capture activities, and I'll talk about some of them today, when you do this, you're giving yourself a competitive advantage, your company a competitive advantage. When you don't do capture and you just get an opportunity into the pipeline and write a response, then you're not going to win that much. You're going to have a low P win, 10% or something. You're just going to be spitting out proposals. This is the weakness of all these AI proposal writing tools, because they're like Wikipedia. People say, Wikipedia is not a source. Well, no, it's not the source, but it sure is a source. And then what you do is you go somewhere else and you validate what you're learning from Wikipedia. Well, AI proposal writing tools, and that's part of what we will drop as well, those are just an assistant to the capture activity that you do. That's the final step, just writing a document. But what's in the document is what you determine during capture. So two main things you can do in capture is you can influence the requirement with the program office and the technical users. So when I say influence the requirements, first off, you have to give yourself enough time. The RFP can't have dropped or is about to drop. But if you give yourself enough time, 3 to 24 months, you can certainly influence the requirements. You can get in there and talk to the government about, hey, did you know about this? Did you know this is the direction industry is going, et cetera? When you make your case with enough data and evidence, the government buyer is going to listen to you. They'll make their decision on that. You're not always going to be able to get them to do what you're recommending, but they want to hear from industry. And so capture is that period of time when you're influencing the government through conversations and education, et cetera. The other one is influencing. Capture allows you to influence the acquisition approach. And so the acquisition approach just means, how is the government buying? Are they setting this aside to woman-owned small business? Are they going down this contract vehicle? Are they using this NAICS code? I like looking at every one of those acquisition-related decisions that the government makes, including things like what FAR clauses are in the RFP. Something as simple as, I just did it yesterday, was writing a response to the government with one of my customers, and it says you have to be in Times New Roman. The minute I saw that, I knew that this contracting officer was just doing cut and paste. It's like, no one's using Times New Roman anymore. Well, if I can hear about those things early, I even say those kind of things. This should be the font. This should be the size. And when you do that, you're influencing the acquisition approach. Of course, you're not going to be able to tell a contracting officer what to do, but you can sure influence them through data and evidence. Here's why I think you should go with this NAICS code, and here's why it's right, and here's where it's been done before. When you bring that kind of data and evidence, the government will listen to you. And that's what capture is really having that conversation with the government and then taking all that you understand or learn from those conversations into your proposal. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing I think people should do when they're doing capture. One of the reasons I created the 7-step process, and I'm sorry I don't have it showing here, but I teach this 7-step process for federal revenue success. And the 7 steps are research, targeting, outreach, leads to relationships, opportunities, proposals, and sales. And so this 7-step process, the idea behind it is that most small businesses don't have this huge sales team. We don't keep changing people who are in a pink team or a red team or a blue team or whatever, right? It's all you doing all the work, or you and a couple of people in your company. And so we might use terms like a business development activity and capture and proposal, but that all pretty likely is you, right? It might be you and a couple of people, but in small businesses, generally the person who finds it brings it all the way home. You might have a proposal writer who helps, but really the person who's talking to the customer is going to move it forward. And so the reason I'm saying that is because business development is when you find opportunities, and it might be a business developer. That might be you, or it might be somebody else in your company if you've got a little bit more room and somebody's like a business analyst who's finding opportunities, throwing them over. My point for this is that the first thing you need to do is determine if it's right for you. If you're in the capture phase, and really this is kind of the first time small businesses were looking at an opportunity, you just want to, if somebody else gave it to you, you're trusting but verifying. And if you found it yourself, you're verifying that it's a good opportunity for you. That's a long way to sit there and say that the first thing you want to do before you do any capture stuff is just go, is this right for us? And here's 3 ways you can do that. And the only 3 ways I care about at the moment, right? The first thing is I look at the title. Is the title of that opportunity aligning to what I think we do? If it is, I move to the second part. Or if it's confusing, I move to the second part, which is the description that the government provides in that around that opportunity. When I read it, does it sound like my company? When you're reading an opportunity and you're looking at this opportunity, you're going to invest your time and money in it. Is it aligned to what you do? And then the third one is task areas. So if you're lucky enough to have let's say a source of sought notice or a early PWS or even a previous PWS, when you go in and you look at those performance work statements, the description of the work, and they break it down, the scope into task areas. When you look at those task areas, do they look like they're your company's strengths? I call it core competency alignment. In fact, when I build pipeline tools for my customers, that's one of our fields is core competency alignment. You have to choose which core competency we have, which is generally like 5 to 6, that these are our core competencies. This opportunity, which one does it align to? And so that whole idea of is this right for you? You're trying to align it to your core competencies. One other thing I really want to point out here is that every opportunity that goes into your pipeline, you should be thinking along the lines of building similar past performance. The biggest challenge with 8A small businesses in particular, and more broadly, all of us small businesses, is we tend to get past performances that are all over the place. We've got it in this agency, this type of work, and this type of work. Sometimes we're able to sneak in and get on a particular contract or something. But the problem with that is it doesn't allow us to grow. Our growth only comes after a certain point, let's say 5 or 10 million. Growth after that really needs to be a competitive activity. Even when you're going after small business set-asides, it's still competitive activity. And the way you're competitive is to have past performances after past performances that demonstrate you are the expert in these core competencies. And so a quick example, my last company, we did Microsoft SharePoint. We used to be able to go toe-to-toe with Microsoft going after opportunities and against Booz Allen, right? We were a small business going against these billion-dollar firms. And the reason we were able to hold our own and win some of them was because all we did was SharePoint. Even though Microsoft built SharePoint, we were the ones who did it over and over again in many different agencies. And so when we would go after an opportunity, we could say, hey, we have this Air Force past performance with 100,000 users. We got this Department of Homeland Security one with 20,000 users or whatever it was, right? And we had these past performances. This is what I want you to think of when you're thinking about, is this right for us? Will this build another past performance that's in our sweet spot to allow us to grow? So this is the very first thing you really want to track on, is to make sure that you're only letting things stay in your pipeline that you can win and you want to win. Like not just the money, right? But you want to win from a past performance standpoint. Okay, so let's talk about 10 things. I could have done animation and built them, but I'd rather you just see them and we walk through it. We've got about 13 minutes left, 10 minutes left, and I'm going to walk through these, and I want to explain why it's important. When I have an opportunity come into my pipeline has these fields, and I don't like a lot of data all around. I like it starting at the top, and the fields are one under each other, because I do the first thing, then the second thing, then the third thing, and they build on each other. And the more fields, these data points that you're seeing that I have filled in or completed, the stronger my understanding of this opportunity is, the stronger my position is to write a response to win. So the first thing, obviously, is I'm just looking for the department and agency. And you'd be surprised how sometimes opportunities come out and you're like, what? For example, if you're on GSA and mass schedules, et cetera, sometimes things come out on eBuy that the GSA is doing market research for some agency and you don't even know who it is, right? And so you got to get creative to try to find it. They're doing this blind market research. And so it's not a given that number one is just right there in the details. So first thing I want to do is to know, do you know the department and agency this opportunity is for? Second thing is funding office, right? And this is a hit or miss, and some people might talk about it differently. But if you go in to FPDS or USA Spending and you go to the bottom and look at the way they lay it out, there's a funding office and a contract office. I'll give you a quick example. The contracting office or the funding office or program office might be a program executive office or a project office like PEO Digital in the Navy or something. And this is bad because I'm going to use another department. But imagine a PEO Digital in the Army, right? Or PEO EIS or something. Actually, there's Communication and Electronics Command within the Army. That's the program office. That's the funding office. But the contracting office, number 3, that is the Army Contracting Command at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so they're totally different commands that are doing it. And the reason this is important as it relates to capture is because when you go in to shape and influence the requirements, you need to know people in the funding office or what we call the program office, right? And when you want to influence how the government is going to buy, the acquisition approach, you want to go talk to the contracting office. And so you want to have people there as well, which you'll see me talk about this in number 5. But so those 2 offices are really important. This fundamental thing for me is so fun because when I look at people's opportunities, I'm like, look, before we get down to the meat of this, you don't even know this. You don't even know who your buyer actually is. Let's pause for a second and go get that, because if we don't have it, I guarantee you the competition does, right? And if you don't know who the funding office is and the contracting office is, then that tells me that you're probably not talking to anybody about this opportunity. And if you're not talking to anybody, then you're just writing responses to opportunities you hear about and you're not doing any capture. So this is a really big flag for you in your pipeline. If you've got people on your team doing this, require that they find that information. Number 4, if this is a recompete, whether it's a recompete or not, you need to make sure you find out, is it a new opportunity or is it a recompete? Those are 2 different approaches, and it's really important to understand, because if it's a recompete, I need that old solicitation number in there, or the current contract's solicitation number. When I have that, it enables me to go learn about the competition and how that was done the last time. It enables me to go find information about the current contract. If there's not really much information about the new contract yet, I can just look at the old stuff. It allows me to go search on, the incumbent and all these other things out there. So number 4, if you tell me it's a recompete, then you need to tell me the solicitation number. One quick thing I'll say about this field, number 4, and all of them, is if it's hard for you, that should excite you, because it is hard for everybody. And most people give up when things are hard. If you keep pushing forward going, I know there's a solicitation number, then you'll be able to find it. You'll start getting better at finding these things, creative. You'll start finding more people. Number 5 that you can reach out to. So number 5 is, I want to see at least 5, if not 10 points of contact for any opportunity that's a real size opportunity. Let's say you're going after 500,000 plus opportunity. I need opportunity points of contact. I need to know people from the program office, 1 to 5 people from there. And these don't need to be people you're friends with. These need to be people who are in there that you'd like to talk to. The director of this, the branch chief here, the division chief here. Put some names in there. That way you're telling us, this is who's in there and this is who I'm going to try to go after. If you go after them and they say, stay away from me, I never want to talk to you again, well, then you can pull their name out and put them on a do not call list or something. But on the opportunity points of contact, you want to have the contracting office. And to me, the contract office includes the small business office. So it's the contracting officer, the contract specialist. Usually there's one of each of those. It's the small business specialist for this contracting shop, and the one for the program office if there's a different one. That's a really important one to remember. And what I always add in, my favorite, is to put in the SBA's PCR, Procurement Center Representative, into every one of my opportunities, so that I have somebody to fall back on if I think things aren't going right, or if I can't reach somebody, I can just reach out to the Procurement Center representative. You can find a lot of training I've done on that'll talk about who they are and their value to your sales effort. But the point is, number 5 here, opportunity points of contact. These are the people you're going to be reaching out and calling. If I don't see that you have that populated with 5 to 10 people, then it makes me feel like you don't know anything about this opportunity beyond what's in SAM or GovWin or whatever, right? Okay, number 6, it's a pretty straightforward one, but if it's a recompete, I want to know who the incumbent is. I want to have a clear understanding of who they are. And in this case, it's not just their name, but I actually want to know if this is an 8A contract, when did they graduate? When are they graduating, right? If it was a sole source, that's a really important thing for me to understand about the incumbent, is that, hey, they graduated 2 years ago. Ooh, let's go after it. They're not graduating. Okay, well, we've got to find out whether this contracting officer likes to stay with the same 8A all the way, or whether they like to give another 8A a sole source chance, right? Those kind of things you find out when you know who the incumbent is and you know information about them. The other thing I find out about the incumbent, once I have who they are, is I go find out how big they are. And I don't mean a lot of work. I just take their UEI, I go to USA Spending. That'll tell me how much they're winning as a prime, a little bit as a sub. That's kind of the end of what I can do there. And then I pop over to LinkedIn and I find their company and I click on people and I see how many people are on LinkedIn connected with this company. And it gives me an understanding of their size and what I'm looking at, right? By the way, one other thing about the incumbent is I go in there, I see this a lot where I see an opportunity. I'm like, oh man, they're in there. But when I get in, I realize most of their opportunities are in other agencies, and this is a one-off. I might be able to team up with them. So knowing who the incumbent or all that activity with the incumbent begins with just knowing who they are. Number 7 is about the contract vehicle. So this is an important one for you to understand. None of these are deal breakers, by the way. Let me pause here. When you're doing capture and business development as well, but especially capture, you're determining, do we bid or no bid? And all that means is, do we think we can win it? But keep in mind, winning isn't just prime contracting, right? If I look at an opportunity and I see I can do less than 50%, then I start thinking about subcontracting. And even if I can only do 25%, I have strategic relationships I've built with people in many different areas. I can turn to somebody and say, hey, Jane, this is really more something you could prime, but I would love this sub. Can we team on it? Are you interested? And either she is or she isn't. It doesn't matter if she hears about it, takes it, and says no. Who cares? Like, she would have heard about it anyways. I just go until I find somebody, right? And so contract vehicle is an example of that. If I find out the contract vehicle and I'm not on it, that instantly tells me I need to find a teaming partner, right? Or I can reach back to the contracting officer really quick and say, hey, would you switch it to GSA such and such? Because that's where we're at. If you get in early, you might be able to influence it. But most importantly, if you have a conversation, you'll get a strong feeling of whether the contracting officer goes, nah, they make us put everything on Oasis. All right, cool. I'm going to go find me an Oasis partner. But you need to know that by knowing who the contract or knowing that contract vehicle. RFP drop date. This is huge for your pipeline, because if you've got many opportunities in your pipeline, you need to be able to rack and stack them and only focus on what's important. So when I look at, we do a daily stand-up with one of our customers, and when we look at their pipeline, it's this 15-minute review of the pipeline that starts at the bottom, and we look at the awaiting awards and go, anything we need to do? No? Okay, let's move up. We look at the things that are in proposal, meaning we're writing a response to go out the door. Is there anything here I need to work on? You need to work on? Anybody having hurdles? No? And then we move up to the next category, which is pursue. For some agencies, it's also got bid, but it doesn't matter. Whatever your next one is, closest to proposal, you're moving up from the bottom, which is a different way of looking at the funnel, right? You're moving from the bottom of the funnel up. And now you're looking and saying, hey, do I need to do something? Well, you want to make sure that the only opportunities you're looking at initially are the ones that are due soon. And so having that RFP date is really important. This goes back to number 5, having people you can call and ask those questions to if you don't have a solid answer. Some contracts like recompetes are pretty darn easy to predict, right? You can see when the contract's going to expire, and you can kind of backdate that up to guess. You can even go over to SAM or something like that to see, did they drop an RFP at a certain point before blah, blah, blah. But most importantly, if you have relationships with number 5, then you'll be able to ask those questions. Number 9 is a simple, straightforward thing, but it helps you throughout the entire capture process. Make sure you document, where did we hear about this opportunity? Was it a referral? Did it come from SAM or GovWin? Wherever it is, put that in so you can track. If it came from the long-range acquisition forecast, I tend to not trust it as much. What I'm looking for at that point is saying, hey, I need confirmation from the contracting office and the funding office that this is actually a real opportunity. It's just not a bunch of stuff they put into a spreadsheet. And the last one is, a really important one for the next phase of capture activity is getting any previous and current documentation. So current being for the next opportunity, but documentation that you can review, whether it's the actual RFP for the last one or the PWSs, any RFI documents, any of the documents that the government uses that are related to this type of work. We put it into our pipeline. It's just attachments to the pipeline opportunity so that you start learning more about that opportunity, and it informs the questions you ask when you go into the government. Okay, so here's what I want you to remember from today's training. First off, I've got a lot of other training on capture. Just go watch my replays here on LinkedIn. You can go to YouTube as well. But on LinkedIn, I've got a whole list of all the replays. Just look for one, search capture, right? But here's what I want you to try over the next day or so, right? The first thing is go into your pipeline, whether it's a spreadsheet or your email or a fancy tool, doesn't matter. Choose one opportunity and then do what I just taught you today. Gather that capture data, that data about your opportunity, and begin to see where you're missing, et cetera. And from that, when you have that in place, you can determine your next steps. Your next steps might be, man, look at all this data I'm missing. I don't know anybody's name. Well, let me go find that, right? Every opportunity in your pipeline, you want to have next steps, right? And the most important one is for like the 3 hottest opportunities. Make sure you know what the next step is. I need to do this or this or this. These 3 steps I put here are great next steps coming out of my training. Hopefully you found that helpful. If you did, put capture rocks into the chat. If you're interested in working with us in our BD Accelerator, you can reach out on govconchamber.com. This is for companies doing 2 million plus in the federal space because it does have a price tag to it. But if you're interested, you learn more over on govconchamber.com. But for all of us, just remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.